Hey guys, tonight we step into a world where water is not just life, but a poetry written in earth and stone, where gardens are more than just plants. They are carefully crafted paradises carved from arid deserts. Imagine yourself trudging through a sun-baked landscape, dust swirling at your feet, when suddenly you come upon a lush oasis, a masterpiece of greenery and water channels shimmering like veins of silver under the blazing sun. You probably won't survive this story without a newfound respect for the ancient Persian gardeners who made deserts bloom with math, sweat, and a touch of magic. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Because somewhere, somehow, we're all connected by water, gardens, and stories that never quite end. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The birth of Persian gardens takes us back nearly 2,500 years, to the fertile lands surrounding the Iranian plateau, where the concept of paradise itself was born. The very word paradise comes from the Old Persian peridaitsa, meaning walled garden. These gardens were not mere patches of plants. They were deliberate expressions of control over nature's wildness, a symbol of cosmic order in a chaotic world. Early Persian gardeners dreamt not only of creating beauty, but of harnessing water, the most precious and elusive resource in their harsh climate. Historians still argue whether the earliest Persian gardens were inspired more by Mesopotamian irrigation techniques or by native spiritual beliefs tied to water and fertility. What's clear, though, is that these gardens were an act of rebellion against aridity, a promise that paradise could be coaxed from even the most stubborn earth. The first Persian gardens laid out water channels in fourfold symmetry, chaharbagh, or four gardens, reflecting the four rivers of paradise described in ancient texts. Now, here's a quirky tidbit. Some scholars suggest that the dazzling water channels and pools of these gardens were designed to shimmer and reflect the stars at night, turning the earth into a mirror of the heavens. So, while you're trying to remember if you watered your houseplants this week, imagine ancient gardeners crafting aquatic constellations beneath date palms. In these early gardens, water wasn't just for plants. It was a living, moving artwork. The sound of trickling water, the cool mist on your skin, even the scent of wet earth after irrigation were all carefully orchestrated elements to soothe and mesmerize visitors. It was a multi-sensory experience, where nature met human ingenuity, where the desert whispered its secrets in geometry and flow. So, as you settle deeper into this tale, remember that Persian gardeners were not just plant lovers. They were mathematicians, engineers, artists, and dreamers, all rolled into one, armed with the will to bend a desert's fate toward paradise. You wake up to a world where the sun scorches mercilessly, and the air feels like a slow oven. Water is as precious as gold, and the soil cracks from thirst. This is the reality that shaped the Persian gardener's struggle, a battle against nature's most relentless adversary, scarcity. The deserts surrounding ancient Persia were unforgiving, and yet, here you find sprawling gardens that seem to mock the arid land. How? Through ingenuity that feels equal parts science and sorcery. Persian gardeners faced the challenge of supplying water to vast gardens with limited rainfall and intense evaporation. They couldn't just dump buckets here and there. No, their climate demanded precision and sustainability. So, they invented methods of irrigation that were marvels of efficiency, blending artful design with practical necessity. The garden became an engineered ecosystem, a self-sustaining miracle in the middle of a desert. One of the most fascinating innovations was the Qanat system, underground tunnels gently sloping to bring water from distant mountains to thirsty lands below. Imagine digging miles of subterranean aqueducts by hand, with no modern tools, all to catch and channel every precious drop. These tunnels reduced evaporation, protected water quality, and made irrigation possible in places that would otherwise be barren. Historians still argue whether the Qanats were purely Persian inventions or adaptations of earlier Mesopotamian and Egyptian irrigation techniques, but their refinement in Persia is undisputed. They became the backbone of agricultural life, supporting not only gardens but entire communities. On the quirky side, There's an account of some Qanats allegedly being guarded by fierce water spirits in folklore, perhaps a poetic way of reminding everyone to respect the precious flow beneath their feet. Whether or not you believe in such spirits, the reverence for water was very real. Persian gardens weren't just plots of greenery. They were sacred oases maintained by complex, almost ritualistic engineering. The gardeners had to master soil moisture, water pressure, and flow rates to keep every tree and flower alive without wasting a single drop. They built small dams, sluices, and channels that could be adjusted daily, responding to weather, season, and need. This wasn't guesswork. It was a careful, mathematical balancing act. And here's where things get even more intriguing. Persian engineers used early principles of hydraulics and geometry to measure gradients and flow velocity, essentially becoming the world's first practical hydrologists. They observed how water behaved, experimented with angles and slopes, and developed an intuitive sense of efficiency that modern engineers would admire. So, next time you complain about watering your garden, think about these ancient pioneers who turned desperation into design and scarcity into science. The Persian gardener's story is not just about plants, but about survival, creativity, and the relentless quest to make paradise bloom where nature seemed to refuse. You step carefully along the garden's edge, eyes tracing the delicate channels where water meanders like liquid glass. Behind this seemingly simple scene lies an invisible architect, math. Geometry, the language of shapes and space, quietly governs every curve, every angle, every ripple in the Persian garden's veins. It's not just that water flows. It flows precisely where and how it should, guided by calculations that predate modern engineering textbooks. The layout of Persian gardens relied heavily on mathematical principles to optimize water distribution. The famous Chahar Bagh design, dividing the garden into 4 equal quadrants by 2 intersecting water channels, isn't just aesthetic. It's a calculated plan to ensure even watering and balance. The geometry creates microclimates within the garden, fostering diverse plant life while symbolizing cosmic harmony. Historians still debate whether the geometric designs were inspired primarily by religious symbolism or pragmatic irrigation needs. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Math and mysticism intertwined. A quirky detail you might not expect. Some early Persian garden designers reportedly used rudimentary surveying tools similar to what we'd call a groma, a Roman invention, suggesting a flow of knowledge across cultures. Whether they eyeballed angles or measured precisely, their results speak volumes about their understanding of space. Persian gardeners understood slopes and gradients intuitively. The water channels had to be just right, not too steep to cause erosion, not too flat to stagnate. This delicate balance required calculation, often involving early forms of geometry and arithmetic, to determine the correct inclines for water to flow smoothly and steadily. Moreover, they crafted their pools and fountains with circular and rectangular shapes, carefully balancing proportions so water would ripple aesthetically and functionally. These proportions often adhered to ratios that modern mathematicians recognize as precursors to the golden ratio, a harmony of form and function. Here's a fun, if slightly odd, bit of trivia. Some water channels were designed to produce musical sounds as water flowed over specially carved stones, creating garden symphonies for visitors. Imagine strolling through a garden where math not only waters your plants but composes a soundtrack for your soul. This fusion of practical geometry and artistry gave rise to garden spaces that were living proofs of math in motion. Proofs you could hear, feel, and even smell. Water was the medium, math the blueprint, and the garden the grand experiment. As you sip your evening tea and watch the water drip from your faucet with little thought, remember these ancient gardeners who understood that to water paradise, you first have to understand the language of water itself, spoken fluently in the mathematics of flow, slope, and space. You find yourself descending into the cool, shadowed depths beneath the earth, where light barely reaches but life quietly thrives. This is the domain of the Qanat, a Persian miracle, an ancient underground waterway that transformed deserts into gardens and whispered secrets of survival through silent tunnels. Imagine miles of hand-dug passages, sloping gently from mountain aquifers to thirsty plains, delivering precious water without a single drop lost to the relentless sun. The Qanat system is nothing short of genius. By channeling water underground, evaporation, a huge problem in dry climates, was minimized. These tunnels often stretched for kilometers, each carefully aligned with a subtle gradient, so gravity did all the work, gently coaxing water downhill. Vertical shafts punctured the earth at intervals, acting as ventilation and access points for maintenance, like breathing holes for the underground arteries of life. Historians still argue whether the Qanats were purely Persian inventions or influenced by earlier systems from Mesopotamia or even Egypt. But Persia's extensive use and refinement of Qanats is well documented, with some tunnels still in use today after over 2 millennia. On a quirky note, some Qanats are said to have been protected by ancient laws forbidding tampering, so respected that disputes over water rights led to early legal codes. You might say, these underground canals were not just feats of engineering, but also the seeds of community governance. The math behind Qanat construction was daunting. Builders had to calculate precise slopes. Too steep and water would erode the channel, too flat and it would stagnate. These calculations required early surveying techniques, often relying on water levels and rudimentary instruments. It was a balancing act of patience and precision, with entire teams dedicated to digging and aligning these tunnels perfectly. Imagine the sheer human effort. Workers digging through rock and soil, using only basic tools, guided by geometric principles passed down through generations. The result was a lifeline, feeding irrigation canals that nourished trees, crops, and entire civilizations. Qanats weren't just irrigation marvels, they shaped settlement patterns. Towns sprung up along their routes, clustering near these hidden veins of water. The gardens they fed became symbols of prosperity, culture, and spiritual harmony. So, as you listen to water trickle from your tap tonight, think of those ancient Qanat builders, whose silent work beneath the ground wove the lifeblood of Persian paradise, where math, sweat, and hope converged in perfect harmony. You stroll through a Persian garden, and it's impossible not to feel the poetry in the air, not just in the flowering trees or the gentle babbling of water, but in the very way water moves, as if narrating an ancient tale. Persian poets didn't just write about gardens. They celebrated the water's journey as a metaphor for life, love, and divine grace. Meanwhile, engineers and mathematicians behind the scenes quietly tuned the hydraulics, ensuring that every drop danced to the rhythm of precise calculation. The intersection of hydraulic engineering and poetry in Persia created a unique cultural symphony where science and art were inseparable. Water was life, and life was poetry. The famous Persian poet Rumi often used the metaphor of flowing water to symbolize spiritual awakening, echoing the actual movement of water through gardens crafted with near-scientific exactness. Historians still debate to what extent poetic symbolism influenced hydraulic design versus practical irrigation needs. Was the beauty of water flow a byproduct of necessity, or was necessity inspired by beauty? The answer probably flows somewhere in between. A quirky fact: some Persian gardens featured fountains designed to produce different pitches and rhythms, effectively turning water flow into an ancient musical instrument. This wasn't just fanciful artistry, but a careful study of water pressure and acoustics, an early blend of physics and aesthetics. Persian engineers mastered the art of controlling water pressure, using small drops, cascades, and pools that regulated flow and created serene soundscapes. Calculations determined the size and angle of spouts to ensure water arced gracefully into basins, minimizing splashing and evaporation. This subtle control required an intimate understanding of fluid dynamics, long before modern hydrology textbooks existed. Meanwhile, poets waxed lyrical about gardens as earthly paradises where water's journey mirrored the soul's path toward enlightenment. The garden's layout, with its intersecting channels and reflective pools, symbolized the cosmos, a divine order made tangible. This poetic scientific partnership gave Persian gardens a dual identity: functional irrigation systems and spiritual sanctuaries. Walking these gardens, you feel both the cool touch of water and the warmth of centuries-old stories whispering through leaves. So, as you listen to the drip of your faucet tonight, remember that water's flow has always been a language, a secret shared by mathematicians and poets alike, telling tales of paradise and human longing. You pause beneath the shade of a towering cypress, taking in the garden's flawless symmetry, a harmony so precise it almost feels mathematical. Persian gardeners didn't just scatter plants randomly. They crafted every axis, every pool, every pathway according to principles of proportion and balance. This wasn't merely for beauty's sake. It was an expression of cosmic order and spiritual harmony, turning earthly gardens into reflections of the universe itself. The concept of symmetry and proportion in Persian gardens often followed the Chahar Bagh layout, the four gardens, dividing the space into four quadrants intersected by water channels. This mirrored ancient cosmologies where the universe was divided into four parts, embodying the idea that earthly paradise was a microcosm of divine order. Historians still debate how deeply these symbolic meanings penetrated the everyday experience of garden visitors. Were they consciously aware of the cosmic reflections, or did the balanced beauty simply soothe the senses? The answer, as usual, is delightfully elusive. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some scholars propose that certain Persian garden proportions hint at an early understanding of the golden ratio, that mysterious number believed to underpin aesthetic perfection. Though it's debated whether this was intentional or coincidental, the garden's harmonious feel certainly aligns with what modern eyes recognize as mathematically pleasing. Persian architects and gardeners relied on simple tools, measuring ropes, stakes, and plumb bobs, to achieve remarkable precision. Ratios dictated the size of pools relative to paths, tree placement to water channels, and the height of pavilions to garden beds. This careful planning ensured that the garden felt balanced from every angle. Symbolism ran deep. Water channels represented rivers of paradise, trees symbolized life and growth, and enclosed walls offered sanctuary and protection. The garden became a three-dimensional poem, where math, nature, and spirituality intertwined. Next time you walk through a park or a backyard designed with deliberate order, remember these ancient Persian visionaries who transformed geometry into paradise, using symmetry not just to organize space, but to elevate the soul. You hear the steady creak and splash of a water wheel turning in the distance, its rhythmic dance lifting precious liquid from river to garden with timeless grace. The noria, this ingenious contraption, became a symbol of tireless labor and mechanical elegance in Persian waterworks. Powered by flowing streams or animal treadmills, Nourias lifted water skyward, feeding irrigation canals and sustaining verdant oases in the unforgiving desert. These water wheels weren't mere machines. They were living parts of the garden's ecosystem, rotating endlessly to ensure every tree, flower, and vine received its share of life. Their design combined practicality with artistry. Wooden buckets attached to a large wheel scooped water at just the right intervals, pouring it into aqueducts or storage basins. Historians still argue how much the Persians borrowed from earlier Greek or Egyptian water-lifting technologies versus their own innovations. What's undeniable is that Persian norias were often larger, more efficient, and sometimes even ornately decorated, melding engineering with aesthetics. Here's a quirky piece of trivia. In some gardens, the water wheels were accompanied by musicians or storytellers, turning the mechanical hum into a backdrop for communal gatherings. Imagine ancient garden parties where water's rhythm blended with song and laughter. From a technical standpoint, the angle of the wheel, the size of buckets, and the force of flowing water had to be carefully calibrated to optimize lift without wasting energy. Builders used geometric calculations to position the wheel and size its components, ensuring smooth operation through the seasons. These water wheels symbolize the human triumph over scarcity, capturing energy from nature to nurture nature itself. As the wheel turned, it whispered a story of balance between man, machine, and environment. So, as you watch the steady drip of water from your faucet tonight, spare a thought for those ancient norias turning tirelessly, their wooden arms circling in a dance as old as the gardens they fed. Mechanical hearts beating life into paradise. You wander through the shaded pathways of a Persian garden, surrounded by flowering shrubs and whispering fountains. But behind this serene scene lies a fascinating tangle of scholarly debate and mystery. Historians continue to argue about the true origins and meanings of Persian garden styles, their spiritual symbolism, and how deeply intertwined they were with ancient scientific knowledge. Some scholars contend that the Chahar Bagh layout was primarily a practical response to irrigation challenges, designed to maximize water flow and crop yield. Others insist it was a sacred geometry, a symbolic microcosm of paradise described in Zoroastrian texts and Islamic theology. The gardens, they argue, were spiritual maps meant to connect the earthly realm with the divine. A quirky historical footnote. In some accounts, Persian gardens were said to have been inspired by the mythical Hanging Gardens of Babylon, though there's no archaeological consensus to confirm this. This enduring myth adds a layer of legend, blurring fact and fantasy. Further debate surrounds the role of cultural exchange. How much Persian gardens were influenced by earlier Mesopotamian, Greek, and later Islamic garden traditions, and how much they in turn shaped those traditions. Were Persian gardens a unique Persian invention or part of a wider ancient garden culture? Historians remain divided. Archaeological evidence sometimes conflicts with literary descriptions, leading to puzzles about garden layouts, water technology, and plant species. Some scholars argue that Persian gardens evolved in response to shifting religious and political climates, adapting symbolism and design over centuries. In this ongoing discourse, Persian gardens become not just physical spaces, but living subjects of intellectual exploration, where math, culture, religion, and ecology converge in complex ways. So, as you rest tonight, remember that these gardens are not just relics of the past, but vibrant puzzles, inviting each generation to explore their mysteries, reflect on their meanings, and find new connections between paradise lost and paradise imagined. You trace your fingers along the smooth stone edges of a reflecting pool, feeling the pulse of history ripple beneath the surface. Persian gardens didn't stay confined to the Iranian plateau. They radiated outwards, influencing garden design across continents and centuries. From the lush courtyards of Mughal India to the formal gardens of Renaissance Europe, the Persian vision of paradise took root and blossomed in diverse cultures. The Mughal emperors, for instance, were deeply inspired by Persian garden aesthetics and irrigation techniques, importing craftsmen, seeds, and ideas. The Taj Mahal's gardens, with their perfectly symmetrical pools and walkways, echo the Chahar Bagh tradition, blending Persian artistry with local sensibilities. This cultural diffusion shows how mathematical principles of garden design transcended borders and languages. Historians still argue about how much original Persian gardening techniques were adapted versus adopted wholesale by these later cultures. Did the Mughals innovate on Persian ideas, or merely replicate them? The debate adds richness to our understanding of garden history. A quirky side note. Some European Renaissance gardens attempted to mimic Persian styles but struggled with the climatic differences, often replacing water channels with gravel pathways, an imperfect homage to watery paradise. Imagine the frustration of aristocrats trying to replicate a desert oasis in damp England. Beyond aesthetics, Persian garden principles influenced urban planning, particularly in Islamic cities where water management was crucial. The garden's focus on symmetry, water flow, and enclosure inspired designs for public parks and even residential layouts. These gardens became metaphors for governance and order, a symbol of prosperity and divine favor. In this way, the Persian garden's math and water whispered through history, shaping not only landscapes but ideas about civilization itself. So, as you imagine distant gardens under foreign skies, remember that the spirit of Persian paradise flows far and wide, carried by water, stone, and the human yearning for harmony. You lean back and watch the sunlight shimmer off a garden's tranquil pools, feeling the ancient math still pulse beneath the surface, echoing through time. The enduring legacy of Persian garden design is not merely in bricks or trees, but in the very principles of balance, harmony, and water management that continue to influence modern landscapes and urban planning worldwide. Today, engineers and architects still study the Qanats and irrigation methods pioneered by Persian gardeners, adapting these ancient solutions to modern water scarcity problems. In arid regions, the Qanat-inspired underground canals conserve precious water just as they did millennia ago. The principles of flow regulation, slope calculation, and water distribution rooted in early Persian mathematics remain relevant and vital. Historians debate how much direct influence these ancient systems have on contemporary sustainable design, but the parallels are striking. The garden's lessons, using nature's patterns and respecting limited resources, resonate louder than ever in our era of climate change. A quirky modern fact: some eco-conscious architects have designed living walls and rooftop gardens that subtly echo the Persian garden's balance of enclosure and nature, while integrating smart irrigation systems inspired by ancient hydraulics. It's like paradise, upgraded for the 21st century. The mathematical underpinnings, symmetry, proportion, and fluid dynamics still whisper through city parks, botanical gardens, and even digital simulations used to plan green spaces. This isn't just nostalgia. It's a blueprint for sustainability and beauty intertwined. So, as you settle in for the night, let the gentle flow of Persian garden waters remind you that the pursuit of paradise is timeless. It's a quiet collaboration between human curiosity, mathematical insight, and nature's enduring grace. An ancient dance still playing softly beneath the surface of our modern world. The pace slows now. You sink deeper into calm, letting the whispers of ancient waters lull your mind. Picture the desert fading into soft twilight, the last warm breeze brushing tender leaves, the quiet ripple of a stream fading into gentle silence. The gardens, once bustling with life and labor, now rest in stillness, their math-woven symmetry melting into shadow and memory. Remember that the Persian gardeners weren't just creators of beauty. They were stewards of balance, caretakers of a delicate harmony between scarcity and abundance. Their legacy is a gentle reminder that even in the harshest conditions, with patience, knowledge, and a touch of artistry, paradise is possible. As you drift toward sleep, imagine the cool splash of water on your skin, the soft echo of a distant noria turning, the delicate scent of blooming jasmine carried by a night breeze. Let these images soothe you, carry you away from the worries of the day, into a place where water flows eternal, and paradise is just a breath away. Now rest easy. The ancient gardens watch over you, quiet, eternal, and full of gentle mathematics, waiting for the dawn.